Welcome! Everyone grab a drink, a slice of pizza. For the love of God, take some pizza. There's a ton back there. Do not be shy. Eat until your gluttony is happy. Hey, Mike. Yeah. One of those rows of lights should be able to turn off. I think it's over there. Just keep like the very back one on. There we go. A little darker. Perfect. Too much.
Just testing.
Oh, damn it. Go! One DenverScript.
Yeah, we
Like, who's first time? Awesome, welcome. See, retention rate. Sweet, so meetups aren't really possible without sponsors, unless I'm floating the bill for everything. So today, sponsoring our food is Salesforce. Does anyone not know what they do? It's a cloud-based CRM. Yes, you all got the answer. Good job. And apparently I skipped one. Code Talent is sponsoring the venue. If that doesn't make sense, you're in it. Is anyone looking for work? Talk to them. They're good. Seriously, they've gotten me like 2 jobs already, so definitely talk to them. Epic Brewing gives us a discount on the beer every month, so thank you for a little discount. And Denver Pizza Company gives us a small discount as well. Oh, actually, you know what? They not only sponsor the venue, I need to update this. They also sponsor our beer. So, double whammy. Also sponsored by Friend Masters. Does anyone know what Friend Masters is?
Woo!
Yeah. We give away 3-month trial. What?
Bury the lead. You're just giving it away.
No, I'm not giving anything away. I can't tell them what we're doing unless I tell them. We tell them every month. Like, shush. So every month we give away 3-month trials. How we give it away? Mystery, unless you've been here before, then you probably know. So look out, participate, be part of the group. Don't be afraid to say stuff. Cool. Well, next session it's called What's Going On in JS Land? Hey, not my computer. Okay, there we go. Enhance. So, because Guillermo is not here today, he can't give what's going on in Chrome. So, unfortunately, I'll do my best. So, in Chrome 70, they didn't really add like a whole lot to DevTools or anything like that. They actually added some interesting new features. So now you can save desktop progressive web applications on Windows and Linux to your computer. So if you're curious what that looks like, we got a GIF. Anyone that says GIF, you're wrong. It's actually an MP4, so I'm wrong. So like Spotify, you can go to their website. It's a progressive web app, and you can actually download the progressive web app straight to your desktop instead of having to download their proprietary install one.
Why is that good for me as a user?
I don't know. Just tell me.
The video.
Didn't you see the video? God.
Powered by Interteams.
It's powered by Blink. Cool. Then also the credential management API is now open. So now, like, if you're on your mobile phone, you can actually unlock a website, so you can log into a website with your finger. That's actually really awesome. It's going to make single sign-on so much more interesting. And also name workers, which Dan's actually going to talk about because I didn't have time to research and he has.
There's a really like grinding your gears joke in there, but
What really grinds my gears?
yeah, workers, man. No, it's just really it's an awesome new way to write or support multi-threaded work and web workers. You're no longer just limited to I/O or callbacks. So, yeah, parallel work. The browser.
Multi-threading. Awesome. Well, that's pretty much all that's going on in Chrome 70, which,
You're really that better.
he would have. He gets really jazzed. I just can't live up to it. That's his fault for being sick. Or being at Casa Bonita. Thank you. You know what? Thank you, everybody.
It's the same thing.
No, sick comes after. Thank you, everyone who didn't go to Develop Happy Hour Casa Bonita Halloween party, where Michael Dusing totally scheduled his meetup over ours, which we didn't change the date. He did. So cool. Just shout out, like, what have you seen like in the last month or two that you're really excited about that you've seen in JavaScript or code, anything?
Gatsby 2 is out of beta.
Yeah.
Isn't that beta for a while?
Only for like a month.
Yeah, late September.
Yeah.
I can never remember what's going on.
I mean, it was in beta for like 3 months or so.
Yeah, just as I was releasing my blog, the update issue, nothing worked. It was
Yeah.
really looking
I just switched the client from 1 to 2, and it was a good learning experience and painful.
Yeah.
Cool. Gatsby 2 is out.
Got 11 came out last week.
What did?
Got 11. It's mostly just improving performance. That's kind of exciting. And I still don't have ES modules.
You're not excited about performance?
I wanted ES modules. That was the thing.
I mean, you can get the ESM module that. God, who the hell's? There we go. It's like somebody's doing it that I know their name. I can't remember.
It's limited because there is no spec. I still haven't finished the spec.
To think of that on that, Node 10 went long-term support.
Okay. Yeah.
Node 10 went in.
LTS.
LT. What else? Come on, front end code changes every day.
React 16.6 suspense.
That's 67.
16.7, sorry. So basically, like, instead of having to do your if this is loaded, do this thing, whatever, it actually just holds it until it's available. It doesn't actually create the node. If you haven't seen Dan Abranov's talk on it at Iceland React, awesome explanation of like all the new features of what you get with suspense.
The React hooks talk as well. Like
Yeah,
React
that's-
hooks.
Yeah.
Which one of your classes?
React Conf, it just was like last week. It's good. He has another hour of like, Danny-ness.
Sometimes I just have a hard time following him
Yeah.
because of the accent. He talks fast and he blows my mind at the
That's
same
right.
time.
It's like he knows how React works too. It's weird.
It's like he works on it or something. Mike, you were about to say something. Oh, was that it?
Yeah, Dan got it.
Oh, liar.
There's also that new thing in React too. I forget what it's called, but it's the stateless functional components that have state.
That's hooks.
Hooks.
Possibly the worst name for it, but I'll take it.
Yeah. That came out. That's live on React Docs now as like a proposed change that's in the pipeline, or like due for prod.
Yeah, that's the 16.7, like iPhone release. I was trying to use the 16.6. I'm
Yeah.
like, why? This is over here. Like, I was like, oh yeah, gotta read the docs. Really something.
Yeah, no, it was funny reading that post where it's like stateless components with state. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Huh? A lot of React in here. Switch it up. Anything else that's not React, or it could be still be
Oh, I saw
React.
people making fun of WordPress 5.
WordPress is still around.
I don't know, like, the memes were, like, there were some dank memes, that's all I said.
View 3 is supposed to drop.
I mean, dank, Donka, it's a little different.
Angular 7 came out.
Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah, Angular.
You don't even like Angular.
I might be the only one.
Yeah, have you seen it?
Oh,
Yeah. Working it out.
I don't even know how you spell it.
Sort of.
I'll fix spelling later, but Stylized Components is now in version 4. I only get excited about that because I started a new job that is Stylized Components, and I'm not a Stylized Component supporter, but now I have to be, so I am.
You sound like you're paid to say
It's more of like, it's better than when I used it last time, which was like,
Progress.
yeah,
It's
who would
like
have
fast
thought?
though, right?
What?
It's like fast though.
No. What else? Anybody have anything else they want to put up there? Is there anything new of you?
Didn't somebody say that
You're doing a talk on Vue.
You've heard of it.
You've heard.
They've made a lot of upgrades to their tester skills.
Did you say testing fields?
Testing cells.
Wait, cells?
Utilities.
Sorry, you gotta speak up, Sonny.
Sound
I'm hard of hearing.
Wasn't there a Vue conference recently? Or was that in like the last 2 months?
the big one was in March.
Wow! Look at me go.
Don't worry, I will go and look up all these items and we'll actually put some links together and GIFs or whatever. We'll make it actually be readable. Let's go with that.
Hey, my updates to React Router v4.4 got released. It's documentation.
Right.
Hours ago.
I think I saw that.
Yeah, maybe.
If anyone doesn't know what that's from, you can Google it and figure out what upgrade with 2 Ds. Means.
Selenium comp happened. They mentioned test cafe.
Did they
Just the Selenium comp.
What? Really?
Yeah, they mentioned a Selenium-less testing of the Selenium comp.
Yeah, I would hope so. So have you seen Selenium? It's like, here's Puppeteer. There's these other tools.
That was funny.
All right. So, anything else? So, Matt, remember, we have the same name. Guess what? You won 3 months trial to front-end devs. It was all right, be honest. It was the second one.
Node 11 was here. We were Node 11.
Right? Oh yeah, I guess I could go back and be like, who did Node 11? What was your name? Dave. You two at least see me after this and we'll get your emails and get you the 3-month subscription. And then who did, you don't count because you're a co-organizer. Who did the React 16? What's React Conf? React Cooks. WordPress 5.
Angular.
Angular 7 third grade.
Angular 7. What's your name?
Emily.
You shut your mouth when you're talking. Awesome. All right. So you three see me. I was like, wait, saying, oh, three of you are sending. Oh, wait, no, they're sending. See me after this, and we'll get your emails, and we'll get those. I'll make Guillermo get out of his sick bed to send those out. Awesome. Last section, Unamas, job announcements. Is there anybody that would like to announce a job that they're trying to fill? Not all at once, please.
I work for a firm out in Virginia. We're looking for React and node.js developers, and we are remote flexible. So let me know if you're interested.
Nice.
Yep.
So afterwards, when we're done and mingling, go find him if you're interested. Anyone else have job announcements? Go. All right, you can finally have your laptop back, Dan.
Yes. I promise I'm not finishing my presentation.
You ready, Jim?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Get some more beer and pizza.
Yeah, go.
Day 2 is a core organizer. Still got those jitters. Oh, not doing great.
Oh, yeah.
Is that why, like, are you?
Yeah, I was
always like objective on the trains. It's
It's a little more like just like
yeah.
oh yeah. Yeah.
That's like your.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, no, that's the trick, dude. You have to
it's kind of this video.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, 7 hour course on web apps, or
Hello? Whoa. Hey.
Hey!
Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Smith, and today I'm going to be talking about building native, dynamic 3D environments using a front-end framework. or essentially making video games using Vue. So before I get started, I should probably tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a Galvanized grad. Yeah, it was about 5 months ago. So I'm kind of a little new. I mostly like to work on the front end. I do know some back end stuff. And since then, I've been working as a freelance part-time. So I just want to cover my bases, just in case nobody knows what I'm going to be talking about. Generally, these are the things I'm going to be bringing up. Canvas, which is a HTML element that's used to draw graphics. 3JS, which is a library used to render WebGL scenes. Vue, which is like React, but for people who are lazy and like to do things. Electron, which is a framework that you can use to build native desktop apps, and Socket.io, which is a library allowing clients to share information. So to start with, Canvas. So it's an XY coordinate system with X, with 0, 0 starting at the top left and expanding outwards. Canvas allows you to draw things like circles or squares. You can even draw many things using object-oriented programming. Generally, what that looks like, what you want to do is define what objects you're going to be making, and then in an initiation function, draw those objects a certain amount of times. It's important because if you want to actually animate things, what you have to do is, in the initiation function, decide what objects you're drawing, give them their own individual methods, like if they're moving or not, and then you call an animation function to update the information for those individual objects. That is important because that is the basis of this entire thing. 2D is pretty rad, but what you can do is move up into 3D. This is essentially just the same simulation, but using another dimension. So 3JS is, it basically just adds z-axis. You can manage your camera with it. You can manage your lighting. You can have no lighting if you're making a weird French video game. You can import models and textures, and you can manage your animations with 3JS. You can even build VR if that's your thing. So the sort of flow that you want to go for when you're building an app is that you want to grab the DOM elements, create the empty WebGL scene, and define a renderer. Initialize the empty scene with like the camera and the lights and whatever objects you want to have in them. Animate the scene with its own update function, listening for any sort of changes on the DOM, and then update the scene accordingly. So implementing a front-end framework is really useful because front-end frameworks, especially like Vue and React, use a virtual DOM, which lessens load times, and that's important for Electron, which we'll get into later. I like it because it also allows you to easily debug stuff. Because if you're like animating something and you want to grab the properties of the object that you're animating, if you try to console log something out and it's happening 60 times a second, it will console log this thing 60 times a second, and it'll just, your computer won't like you. Your browser won't like you. Nobody will like you. It allows for better state management and access to any sort of like plugins that you want to use. So it follows a similar sort of flow. You want to set up your component with event handlers, build properties. So for instance, like if you have a data, if you have in your data, you can define like a camera as an empty object, and then you can set up a mounted initialization method, which will, make the camera and apply whatever properties you want to it. Call the animation function, and then update the properties with Vue, with the event handlers that you saw. So like when I was clicking on something, all that was happening was it was shooting a method off inside that component, and that component would tell the renderer to change something, and then it would automatically update in the animation. So I like it just because it's really easy to componentize things and build from there. I was not used to this size. I didn't make this for this size. The example is this presentation. It is built entirely out of Vue and uses the componentized 3JS values. Electron. So Electron is a way to make native apps. And probably the best thing about it is you can access a user's hardware. Because normally, you're kind of pinholed inside the browser. But Electron builds a Chromium wrapper, essentially, which can allow you to have higher performing apps. It pairs well with a virtual DOM because Electron's biggest drawback is the fact that, if you ever use like normal rendered DOM elements, they're really terrible and go really, really slowly. You can build things across platform. You can access the same debug tools that you're using for your front-end framework development. You have no browser or compatibility issues, which is a godsend when you're trying to, render a mouse. God damn it. And I have a Vue plugin right here, which is the plugin that I use for the Electron, because it just basically just is a plugin that you can use to build the app out. And Socket.io, which is the last section, allows for multiple clients to share data simultaneously, which essentially just means you can make multiplayer games. It takes the logic off the client's end and puts it onto the server end, and standardizes the animation refresh rate so you don't have to worry about like one person going slightly faster than another person. The way it kind of works as far as flow goes is you build the properties list and state the socket.io connection. Set up the mounted initiation method with socket_init.newPlayer, and that sends to the server side to create a player object, and then pushes it back to the client side saying, hey, here's the ID. The event handlers in game interactions, like all the stuff that's already been set up before, it receives the update, and that emits another socket thing. On the server side, you receive those emitted values and you update your object accordingly, and then you send that back to the client side, and the client side says, oh cool, these are all these numbers, I'm going to render them as I want. And for this demonstration, I just have a little thing. That's and that broke hardly. Cool. Just one sec. Well, that is horribly broken. Sorry about that. But what this is just like a pointer lock control system. There's another cube there, which is supposed to be this computer. But for some reason, it doesn't like me and is refusing to connect because I ran a module build. Anyway, yep. Well, that is what I would call a total, what's it called? Moore's Law, when everything that could go wrong goes wrong.
That's not for your slides for.
I saw 3 things.
Yeah.
Three.
Yeah, 3.
Yeah, some things were alive. Yeah. That's my contact information. If you are interested in contacting me, maybe to give me some condolences. Yes, Matt.
So you were saying with Electron, you don't have cross-browser issues. Is there potential issues with cross OSs?
From what I've read, no. From what I've tested, I haven't had enough testing. So let's go put on a soft, perhaps.
So had that gone according to plan, what would have happened?
Essentially, what's trying to happen, what I was trying to have happen, maybe if the other computer would have connected to the same server, and you would have been able to see the cube moving in real time.
Okay, got it.
But for some reason, it does not like me. And I'm not sure why. But these things happen.
Computers don't like Monster.
Yeah, it worked when I tested it like half an hour ago. All right.
Are you 404 kid because you're not found or because you're from Atlanta?
Because I'm not found. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a shame.
Yeah, that's. I'm not found. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
In these 3D applications, how many users can Socket.io support at once?
It's not really the users you have to worry about. It's what you're rendering and what the server can handle.
Yeah.
So like if you have a really not good server, it won't be able to handle like a lot of people. If you have like a really beautiful rendering animation scenes and stuff, it will also probably not be able to handle too much of that, really depending on how you set it up. I don't know, like something like that, like where you just have like 2 cubes moving in an empty space.
Right.
You could have, and on like a basic Heroku server, you could probably have like 10, 12 people without like something terrible happening.
So Socket is truly just the connection. It's not, they're not serving up anyway. It's between your server.
Yeah, so it's just basically, you know, the clients receive the emit or the emit function, build out a player object, and then update that player object when they receive other emit functions from the client side. Like if somebody inputs a certain key, like W, it'll update the velocity on the person and then calculate out the position and then send that back to the client side, and both of them will be able to see them move accordingly.
Cool.
Yes.
That's a question. How well does like a web, if you make a game like this, would you make like a wrapper for the phone, or would you just like have people go to a website and look it up on the phone?
Well, that was the part of Electron, because Electron you'd be able to build basically a native app if you really wanted to. So you could like have something that somebody could like download and execute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would you separate the desktop part and the phone app because of like you would see things differently? The phone is small and the desktop. Like you just showed us like that huge thing on the screen. Do you think it'd be a good idea to have like a totally different experience? Or?
Well, like what do you mean? Do you mean like scale?
You can only see so much on the phone, and you can only do so much on the phone, whereas the computer you can see like a lot more. You can use the keyboard and the mouse.
Yeah. You would probably have, like, if you wanted to build a game for a phone, you could just have specific event listeners for that. Does Electron deliver to phones? Because I think it's just desktop.
Yeah.
So
That's what I'm trying to say, like maybe like phone gap or something like that. You can wrap it.
You can probably make it a progressive web app.
Oh, with Electron. You're saying?
No,
Just different.
progressive web apps would be like
Yeah.
not doing Electron, and that would be still strictly browser
Basically.
based. But you can still hook into phone hardware
Yeah.
with the new browser APIs.
Okay.
probably maybe build something in React Native. Yeah. I saw you were having.
This might be out of bounds and we don't have enough time or something, but is there any chance we see just a quick run through the code?
Sure. That is not an issue compared to apparently even running.
Don't you have a capstone in relation to the?
I do not. I do not know what you're talking about.
Full denial.
I can neither confirm nor deny the allegations of that woman.
That's the old Clinton reference.
That was. Oh, okay. Let's see. This is who set this up. What person did this?
Is this on your GitHub?
No. This is yes, it is on my GitHub. I have a Git version of it, but this is just the Atom. So these are the two parts in question. This is the component of the actual game itself. I've initialized it with all of the possible things I need, basically. That's very descriptive, Joe. I've initialized all the properties that I'm going to be using and manipulating. I then need some created functions because I found that with pointer lock controls, you need to actually access the document itself. So starting off with a created element that basically just happens before the web page is like fully loaded. Good. So this is the mounted initialization component, and it runs down here. That is a socket part. I build out the geometry, the lighting, the position, the starting positions of the player and the other player. Where is it? I then build out who the player actually is, which is up. Oop. Build player. Why is? You have to beg my pardon. I wrote this all today. Okay, but essentially it's builds out the player, defines the properties, and then sends it over to my server. On the server side, I receive it down here with, socket.on create player. That's what it receives. It then pushes through the player.on connect method of player, which essentially runs this command, which builds out the player object from up here using it updates, defines a base, it initializes a base position, ID, directional movement, velocity, direction, rotation, pitch, and wherever the mouse is. And then it creates a method that's called update and returns itself after adding itself to the list of players that are there. And then it sends back, and after it's done building out the player object, it sends back to the client side saying, hey, I'm done. You exist. Congratulations, which is what this is. I then assign a property itself ID equal to the data.id, and that's so that I can individually choose them out and assign like where they are and what their camera position is. And then I listen for any sort of updates, like, somebody wants to move forward. So what they have is they have a key down position, which states which has an input ID and a state of true, and a key up position. Basically, they press down on something and they press up. It's true when they're pressing down, false when they're pressing up. And inside here, that reads as this. So it receives input, and it reads the case and does a switch statement to say, hey, player.moveForward equals data.state. And while it's doing that, it updates. It's continually running this update function. So it says, move forward is now 1. So minus that from 0. So you're going 1 forward. And then do a whole bunch of math. And then update where you are. Yes. That's how that works.
Thank you.
Yeah, 404 kid.
Math.
Through math.
Not the same as math.
Do all that math.
You really don't want to do math.
Just do it.
So I was wondering, are you familiar with?
Please eat some pizza. Please let me know if you want a pizza.
So I guess in particular, you know,
This guy did the like.
There are some. Mostly just because, as far as like organizing the actual game itself, the main information is all on the server, and it's just the client server, right? Whereas if you connect to client to client, like they're passing information between each other. Like what do you
I was just asking if who's familiar with any other way to set it up aside from clients or like socket IOs. Is there any alternatives by which just clients interacting with each other directly, or maybe after the initial connection? I'm sure there's some that are peer-to-peer that's like mainstream enough to work. I know there are.
Yeah. I was gonna say. Yeah.
Well, I would look at WebRPC. Okay. That's my best guess. I think WebRPC does this stuff. I don't know how that would work. That's really interesting, especially with a project like this, where you have the clients doing all the work and just all kind of.
Oh, that's right. Disconnected as soon as I close it. Disconnected from the internet. From your Wi-Fi.
Whoa.
Wi-Fi. This is your problem.
I have to go to
This is. Look, I think probably show you guys it. Yeah.
What up there?
Oh,
You're running out of battery though.
I am. Everything.
I played
You think that's bad? Try doing hardware from this. Software defined about like 6 times.
That's weird that actually. I feel like I've met you before a bunch of times. Denver, I feel like it was like, sorry.
You're telling them. You tell us.
I should have known Denver. Yeah, that was open. Right up for it's like a history span. With South America.
Does he work construction? We had a guy that volunteered this year when we had 2 giant events that filled up, so I don't know if he worked for 2 by 4. OSB and the volunteers, he was a software developer. He's trying to get back into it. But he's South American, has an accent.
You just told me to like see I felt like very bad.
We have to sit there after
yeah, exactly. That's why
you're able Thank you for being honest and not drinking. Yeah, I'm in the car, Joe.
What?
How old are you?
I am. How old do you think I am? That's exactly.
Is that 19 or 20?
No, I'm not. I didn't drink.
My favorite was we had. I'm like, you're fucking drinking.
I just read from my side. I unless he's moving like 3 years under here. What do you do here?
Luckily, they were totally they actually came up to me and they're like, hey, so we're 15 going to high school, technically high school. I'm like, oh, just stay away from the car. And we're all good. I'm assuming it's.
Yeah. I sent you.
It's like Windows 10 and
It's like,
both ways.
The only problem that you have
I've been looking into it because I think it's really complicated. My Mac.
I feel like it gets rid
Yeah, you just gotta keep doing that. What would you recommend inside of
So you can afford that's the best slash drivers.
I have somebody at the workstation. I have
I think it's because they all my practice runs. I only get
I like that. It's fair. There's benefits to having one, but like,
You can do it even without an Apple. You can do all the things.
Yeah.
Take it back. You're gonna be like
Well, I think it's actually I'll have to month I'm gonna get into like it, so it's
because that's
yeah. So I'll eventually I'll have to buy it, but at this point, if you go on the practice, I can look at it and open it soon, but
I mean, if you have a Windows machine, you can see if it's a working machine. Then you can ask the to do
So that's what these projects.
oh wow, you could have just done that.
very much good.
Wait.
Do
The demo works. Yeah!
As it turns out, the code is fine. I'm just sometimes.
Welcome to coding.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm clearly multiplying the velocity, not adding it. Never mind. So I've got two little squares. They're two different clients because it's two different websites. I was trying to use this on another computer, but I forgot that I have so much space that not only is my slideshow terribly out of proportion, but also I can have two different screens. So you can see on the left side, right now I'm controlling the right one, left one, right one, right one. Stage
left or stage right?
Stage left. How's left? And I'm this little square that's going around in a circle. And now it's getting really terrible because I have 7% battery life.
6%.
6%. Yeah.
You got 7 minutes.
So that's essentially how it works, is that one person is able to update another, or one person can see another person's movement and updates, like where they're aiming and stuff. Neat.
Got
And next we'll be talking about how low battery can up your blood pressure and anxiety.
I don't know if I have a heartbeat anymore. It just feels like one straight scream. Thanks.
Dancer.
You may want to put those in the back.
Do that.
It's almost Halloween, so who's about your So I'm not a developer. I'm not a development background, and I want to be a developer. So how come I decide to use this development in RC plus? Yeah. So I think it's complicated.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
Hey, I'm here to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart. It's one that some of you may have heard me talk about before. And let me just start by saying I think this is the companion article that I've wrote for this. This is something that I've really been trying to dial in my messaging in to discuss this async versus promises or async await versus promises debate. But I just want to take a moment to just let y'all absorb my view, just genius in selecting an image. This, I think, distills the core of this issue. Really, there's no emotional reaction to talk about it.
Which one do you like better is the question.
It's just like the same word twice.
Yeah, isn't it just like a tortilla with beans and cheese and stuff and just different? Well, now we're gonna get a fight.
One shell or something we're talking about?
Oh,
Tacos is just the meat.
that's next door. Oh, man.
What's the meat of the tacos or burritos?
Okay. Tacos win. Let's. No, so this is something that I hear a lot of people talking about and the discussion has kind of moved towards this assumption that async await is replacing promises in the same way that effectively promises replaced callbacks. Now, that wasn't something that TC39 or node.js planned. To them, they're just adding async primitives. These are just different tools in your toolbar. But the way these things play out in the real world is you don't see callback examples in docs, especially recently written docs. Now, for better or for worse. So oftentimes, the majority of documentation out there today you'll see that does async work will use promises. At least up until recently. I've seen a lot of a strong trend in the industry to kind of treat it as though this is the break from promises everyone's been waiting for. And they repeat things like, promises are broken, they can't do errors right. Which is interesting, because I don't know if you know this, but async await is built on promises. In no way does it do anything different. Everything that happens under async await has a parallel construct in promises. In every case, there's no exception. So any problem that you can get in your in promises, there's a similar companion piece of code in async await that has the exact same flaws. Period. It's that simple. They both have sharp edges. So given that, wouldn't it be better if we just learned how to use them? There we go. I mean, I can show you the cat photos if you want. Say that for later. So if they're basically built on the exact same async primitive under the hood, you probably should learn it. I mean, and sure, async await is a cool and seemingly attractive tool, but it's got some notable gaps. If you use it for a while, you're going to notice that async await kind of seems familiar in the pros column, and actually, you'll give it credit. It's indeed the simplest async pattern there is. But it only, by being simple, it turns your async code into synchronous thread blocking code. You write it as simple as if it was synchronous. Well, the trade-off is it might as well be synchronous if you're going to write it that way. So what are we giving up? Are we actually using the JavaScript callback queue? Are we using this thread pool? And the idea is we're not. Like the way async await is often pitched, one, it's all lies. Like I said, errors, not really a thing. You can, paint yourself into a corner, find yourself in a lot of trouble with errors on either side. So I will get to the errors at the end here, but let me just talk about how async await it also lets you just kind of create a mess of code. You can just write these giant functions, and no one's stopping you. The pattern doesn't encourage good coding practices. So with promises, there's actually some cool things going on behind the scenes. Who's heard of promise.all? Promise.race? Cool. Yeah, I don't use it as much either, but it's a thing. And there are no async await keywords to do the same thing. You may say, well, Dan, just use async or await promise.all. Well, you just did both. Like, how is that solving anything? And so, I hear these arguments over and over. And, they're even, you'll see them on Google's developer blog, or their official Chrome or Google or developers.google.com. I've got it linked in my article. They discuss it as though this is this panacea, this async await solves our promise problems. But the examples are fraught with issues. In fact, their very examples on Google's site have some of the flaws I'm going to discuss tonight. So let's get specific. Let's talk about the three areas where this actually matters. So organization and composition. Who knows what composition is? It's a fancy word, asshats like to throw around to sound smart. It's basically just gluing stuff together. So now when you're putting code together, you can say that was well composed. It really plays well in an interview. The other side is concurrent and parallel work. I don't want to split hairs on the difference there. The important thing is that if you're awaiting everything, you're not doing anything in parallel. You've just added a bunch of stoplights to your freeway. That's just how it works. And again, my favorite, most infuriating point is the errors in debugging in promises. They work great. They may not have 5 years ago or 6 years ago. Today, it's amazing. Like, you just have to follow a few rules. Like I said, we'll get to that. So for organization and composition, gluing shit together, this is the experience most people get when you refactor code. This is my favorite refactoring GIF. I'm going to use it. You see this all the time. You go to try, put in one method somewhere in your 200-line function, and you end up like this poor soul trying to fix a wall. It's never gets old, really. I'll just keep it up. So it's something that probably hits a nerve with a lot of developers. This is something that, refactors can be scary if you don't know exactly, if you don't have a test suite, or it wasn't your code to begin with. It can be terrifying. Really, you don't know all the places this code's used to go do global searches on your project. You don't really know if maybe there's some other project that uses it. Who knows? Like, the amount of questions that you have to ask to understand something that's in code you didn't write is endless. It's potentially infinite, which is terrifying. So if that's the case, what promises let you do is they let you focus on building functions as your building block. That's my pitch. Use functions as building blocks instead of just instruction by instruction, code soup. Code soup works. I start usually writing it myself, but I always try to finish and do the refactoring step. Take advantage of it being my house or my refactor, so I don't have this situation. Before I leave my code, I refactor, break up my tiny functions. I'll show you some examples of that shortly, but that's the overarching picture. So concurrent and parallel work. I mentioned promise.all. There is support in promises for cancellation, though it's not like an official thing. But as a but it is proposed, and there are several implementations that are being worked on. There is no way to cancel something you just awaited. There's not like a maybe await. Await-ish. Yeah, it's not await. So there's a lack of just fundamental keywords that are just not there. Async/await is it. JavaScript has a limited pool of keywords and reserved words that it can pull from. Now they can't just add words just because they feel like it, because they may be variables. People may be using those terms. So async await was basically it. Promise.all, that was built, constructed out of a class system. It was added in userland first. So promise.all, or promise, is something that we all take for granted now because it's built into every engine. But because promise includes all these other use cases, there is no way to use async await on its own. So inevitably, in every project, I always find myself using async or using promises. Promise.all, promise.race in some cases, but definitely, and in a couple of cases, cancellation. I don't know how to use that with async await. I'm all ears if someone has ideas on how to do that. But from what I understand, there is no user story or no a story that's being worked on to answer this. The story is, or the answer is just await your promise.all. And again, facepalm. That doesn't solve anything. So again, one of my other favorite gifts. This is how I kind of feel like when I'm using async await. It's this limited tool set. I just have like one tool. And I can't use it very well. So this, I know, I really chose some gifts that just get better. They're only like 2-second loops, but they still get better. But really, it does feel like this when you just, that saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, well, problems start to look like nails. Well, you better have a better hammer situation than this. Or else you're really gonna be banging some crummy ass nails and building a dodgy house. You'll probably have to redo the walls like the last fellow we saw. So this, sorry, it's just distracting. I just want to chuckle every time it loops. The issue is that it's just a limited tool set. It's a limited toolbox. It doesn't have everything. So this idea that it replaces anything is just fundamentally not true. And how can it replace it when it just deals with one narrow use case, the most simplest use case? And indeed, it does do it well, but that is it. It's a limit of it. And in fact, on the errors and debugging side, this is where like the biggest pile of lies that I see from Google's own developer blogs to documentation to people on TC39 who very much know JavaScript will spout off these like just preconceived notions that, oh, well, at least it's not as bad as errors and promises, as if it's never worked. That is absolutely not true. It works, and it works well. Like I said, there's a few ways to make it work, make sure it works. So, or let me just describe this. Who's here has actually screamed at a promise chain, or like wondered what happened to a result, or knew there was an error and the goddamn machine just wouldn't tell you? Okay, so I can see either tears or hands. I'll take that as everyone. And this is a real problem. And admittedly, you'd be forgiven for thinking this is a problem with JavaScript or with promises particularly. But let me assure you that any issue that you can run into with promises, you could do with regular JavaScript, you can do with async await, you can do with generators, all of it. All the errors, they're just errors that have basically originate like 20 years ago. These are baked into the language, and I will show you here shortly. Let me just say that again. Error visibility issues, not caused by promises. That's so true, I even put it in there twice. So take a look at this. This comes down to what the problem is with error, with the alleged problem with errors or promises. Who could tell me what I'm talking about here? Have you ever thrown a string? I see it all the time. In fact, that's the commit. I just got into Gatsby, which I can't wait to get my swag. Thanks, guys. The Gatsby project had a plugin, WordPress plugin, that had this error. I wasn't using it. I just spotted the bug. Basically, this is a common thing. I see it in popular projects all the time. Like this is, I find it in code reviews. This is something that expert developers fumble all the time. You can throw anything. It just is ill-advised. You will not get a proper error message unless you create an error with new error, period. That's the rule. It exists inside promises, outside promises, it doesn't really matter. If you throw a string, you will not get a line number. Or you may not get the preceding call stack. You may not know which function even led to that. You may get that line number on that function, nothing else. And you'll be like, oh, promises ate my error stack, what the hell? It didn't. You can write synchronous code that does this. Like if you copy this throw enter valid username line into a REPL on its own, you'll get a bogus, like you won't get a call stack. You'll just get maybe a line number reference. And therefore it ate the error. It's just how errors have always worked in JavaScript. Since the dawn of time, it can't be fixed without breaking everything. So given that, it's really a mystery to me why people assume that promises are the reason for this. Now, maybe it's because async code can be hard to make sense of, and when something does break, you're much more frustrated and you'll thrash a lot more trying to find it. So your anger level, peaks. We'll call it your effort level or something. So, while that's peaking, you're much more likely to blame the environment, say how crappy it is and how miserable this is. And it's actually easy to avoid this one. Just throw an actual error instance. That's step one to getting your actual call stack, letting you know what list of functions led to that line. Simple as that. The other thing is catch. How does catch work?
It gets wherever you throw.
Yeah.
Where you throw and it goes to the first catch, or else it keeps trying until it's.
Yeah, like it goes to the next, so you're kind of like basically suggesting it flows, kind of. It catches things that were thrown above
It
it.
doesn't go to any events. It goes to a catch, and then if there is no catches, it just doesn't resolve.
Yeah, so if there's no catches, you get the dreaded unhandled rejection error. And people get irritated. They're like, this is promises fault. You can have unhandled rejections in regular JavaScript. You can do it in callbacks. Who's ever forgot to do an if error callback handler? Wow. Are callbacks that dead, or is everyone that good at callbacks? I don't know how to read that. So yeah, if you've ever written a callback, the first line, you have error value as your handler. And the next line is, if error, you got to call the callback with the error. If you don't, good effing luck finding that. Seriously, that is going to be a pain in the ass to find. And yeah, I have spent so many countless hours trying to identify those kinds of bugs in my code base. Luckily, there's tooling now and ESLint rules and stuff that'll catch that sort of thing. But it's definitely just as sinister as forgetting your error handling anywhere else, whether it be Golang or other languages even. You can forget your errors, you'll be in just as much shit. Simple as that. Dropping errors, bad everywhere. I don't know why promises get the bad rap. So what I'm saying here is make sure you are always catching properly. One of the biggest issues I see is in Express code. By the way, this is an Express handler for a made-up API/cats. We've got a get all method. Every presentation needs a cats example in there somewhere. But right here, what we've got is, how many code pathways are there here? As in, how many places could write out to the browser? A second. Oh, yeah, I'm seeing the right answer. Oh, I love it. Okay, last time I did this presentation and I asked how many code pathways there were $50 on the line. But I knew no one was going to get it. So it was a pretty safe bet. This one, I just saw 5 hands show too. Instant. Why was that possible? like limiting your code pathway is you probably agree is a good idea. But why were people able to quickly identify the number of code pathways? I mean, I had similarly sized code before, maybe like 5, 6 more lines, and there was actually like 9 potential exits. So what? Yes. How'd you know? Yeah, so really what it does is if you only have .then and .catch in your async API, or as ways to deal with control flow, that really gives you a restrained a way to understand your code. There's only 2 places that this can exit. You know, if it fails anywhere up, if the DB get fails, if it can't get that collection, or if it the find fails, any of these methods that fail above it, they'll all just flow down to that catch. Doesn't matter what kind of error it was, they'll just go down to that catch. It'll get sent out to the browser, the user will know what happened, the server will keep running, everything will be good, and that's great. We don't, because if you've ever seen a express error or express route fail to send a response to the browser, this is like a sinister level of misleading information that comes to your browser. It comes out as a CORS error. Just a half response sometimes is a CORS error. The reasons for that I won't go into now, but it's not a CORS error. I just described a database connection issue. Where how does that create a CORS error? It's because that's how the browser sees it. It sees partial headers and only a partial response, and it's left to deduce must be CORS, just a half response. And sometimes it comes across as a timeout. I've seen students spend hours Googling for CORS when they've already got CORS support in their project. It's there. That's not the error at all. The browser keeps saying it's the error. So not printing out errors correctly is a major source of problems in any paradigm. So it's critical that you handle the .catch and either pass your next method in from Express, or actually do a res.send or res.status 500 with a send in there. So that's a key piece. I included a React example. I figured that'd be appreciated. Sorry, Joe. all respect of you.
I built the React Native app.
Okay, it was great. It was really great. But the idea is, if you're mindful of your code pathways, if you are consciously thinking about where it makes sense to handle errors, you always make sure that there's a place to handle your catch. And that's an important thing. It actually requires a little bit of finessing and learning where you want to put this catch. Because it doesn't make sense, like a lot of people reflexively see these errors or warnings from Bluebird or other libraries that say, oh, make sure you have a catch. Don't forget to catch. Like they'll and they'll just scare people into thinking that they have to put it everywhere, like compulsively. Just if you don't have it, it just falls apart. And they do it like you put a console log in there. Doing that is the almost malicious level of negligence. It is not going to help. It is a lazy way out. Almost never do you just want to console log an error in your catch. I mean, sure, you'll see it, but almost in every case after that, it will not get printed out to the end user. The browser won't see it. Your React app won't show a dialogue about it. It may show up as a React red screen or that React error page, or in your console as your code will just not run. You will get a dead pathway. No one wants that. So you've got to be mindful. Where it makes sense to put an error handler is wherever the user is going to be able to see the success of your outcome. It's probably a similar place you want to show a warning. So wherever you're actually handling success, like showing the results of your user request or your kitten request, you get that kitten API data, you probably should have a place next to that to show a potential message for errors, or, hey, this request is taking longer than we thought, hang on, we're retrying. You probably need to handle workflow like that. So whenever you're creating a page that has a view for the success of an output or a express route that handles the successful delivery of data, always create a way to catch the failure. It has to be handled in a similar way. It's as simple as that. You can't do like in other programming methods, it was the same. If you're on the view that shows my results, Google doesn't make me click through to like 4 other pages to find the error message if my search didn't work. So that wouldn't make sense. But if there's some problem, I get notified. My Gmail, if it can't update, says it right at the top. It's in the same place. So they design with intention. They make it so their error handling is handled in the UI, and it's handled in the same place in the UI as it's handled with the success results. Doing that makes it actually really easy to say, oh, here's my catch error. I do console log it because I want to see it, and maybe I don't want to link that data to the client. But my set state uses the preferred React way to actually say success is false, and then I can just show a generic message to the user. But if I'm not like using the framework or using the technology to display that failure, I'm failing the user. I'm making my life as a developer harder. It's going to be impossible to debug, especially in production. You're just going to drop these references. It's going to be impossible to understand what's going on. Not impossible. It's just going to be frustrating. It's your effort level, whatever. Yeah.
Or you just do what everybody else does and allow people to access information that gets sent to developers automatically.
So everyone should be a developer? Is everyone going to be a developer then? Because
I mean, that's everybody's data gets sent to, nobody has control of the data, so grab everybody's stuff, it doesn't work.
So are you talking about like crummy APIs and stuff? Because sometimes I have to deal with that. Like if errors aren't being handled successfully, I sometimes have to monkey patch out round code that didn't throw a catch up. I don't know if this answers your question, but it relates to it. But this other thing is you really can struggle to actually handle failures. If there's a dead code path, if the code you're calling doesn't actually return errors or doesn't return data all the time, if it just drops the results. If that happens, you're gonna be in a world of hurt, and there's gonna be some janky ass ways to figure that out. Like I've actually gone to use timeouts to like watch and see, oh, if I don't get a result in say X amount of time, just actually throw an error and that'll go to the catch. Not proud of it, but it works. But sometimes you just don't control that third-party stuff or what other developers are giving you.
I was talking more like OS stuff, like Apple or Microsoft. Like let Microsoft know or let Apple know stuff crashes. They basically just gather statistics and data.
Oh, like the crash reporting and stuff.
And I think for App Store that does the same thing. People can just get. It's like you want to help developers, and you should check. They get to get everything.
Yeah, they just get a snapshot of everything in memory, your credit card. Just goes up, and then some developers just up. Yeah.
So I feel like I know you answered this, but how do you feel about try catch blocks?
They seem great. How would you? So people say that catches suck in promises. So let me show you. Okay, so I've got a piece of code. This is exactly what you're asking for. I'm going to ask you if you can spot the error. Seriously, if I got $50 in it. I've only got $1 on me, but I was hoping I had $50. But spot the error. I've got this in a try-catch block. There's an async method that could fail. It could eat the error just like a promise that doesn't throw and doesn't have a return for the return data. It is the exact same flaw.
Users not get one piece.
Yeah, you're not waiting anything.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's just as easy to do,
Only like 2 seconds.
Exactly. But that is even harder to spot actually, because now you've got different semantics. Like there's actually multiple ways to return the state of a function. Like async await kind of muddied the waters of functions. They used to be simple. You push data in, they're called your arguments. You want to return data back, it's called return. It's literally in the words, return, it gives it back. Like that's it. Okay, but now we've got this funny thing, await. Who could tell me the difference between return await, and just await?
Oh, and why you'd be returning the promise.
Yeah, there are slightly different semantics between them, but there's different rules between them. But I just described 3 different ways to return out of this async await paradigm. Are we really simplifying things by making it so my functions have now 3 kind of ways to return? And and ESLint also tells me it's a bad idea to return on await. Returns how I exit a function. I don't shut the F up, ESLint. I want to exit the function. I don't care if you think I can just say await thing and it'll just kind of work. It's kind of like they really complicated how functions work and control flow. I've yet to meet someone who can just on the spot explain each one of those in specific detail to me. I mean, I've talked to, I talked to someone on the Google team who actually worked on the async await spec. Save for them, I've never met anyone who can actually tell me the nuance differences. So if that's the level of expectations we set, that's insanity. Like, what the hell are we doing? So async await, it seems cool. It makes our control flow easier. But at what cost? It ruins our functions, changes how they work, and there's a lot of mixed messaging in the community. It's hard to understand what the exact behavior between them is. And unless you've seen the problem before and you know that awaiting is critical, and if you omit that, the try catch block means nothing. It helped us catch nothing. The error got thrown into the void of space just the same. So we're not like, that is a critical shortcoming, and all we did was it's like we traded a few dollars for, or traded a 50 for a couple extra bills. They turned out to be ones. It's like, we're getting a pretty raw deal here. So this is how I think of async await. Because when I create it, it kind of works. And I keep crawling. And it keeps working, kind of. Until it doesn't, until I forget that await, until I forget something. Or until I'm calling code that isn't written in quite well enough or doesn't handle catches well. And then those errors just get eaten. Definitely I've been doing a lot of pull requests to fix those things. But it seems endless. So why did we trade this out? Okay, I think there was another slide on this, but so anyway, this slide right here is basically showing another pattern that I've used in a lot of my other demos or a lot of my other documentation. My website uses this pattern a lot. It's a login and authentication thing. A lot of people say that's a single purpose. You want to log in? One thing. Off. Do it. Well, what I'm showing here is that you can break out even a simple auth method into tiny reusable functions. The virtue of this, now it may look a little strange, and admittedly it is alien. However, the virtue of this is every piece of this is testable without any other dependency or there's no tight coupling. Like, there is nothing gluing this together except the very top method. That's it. Each piece is independent. There's no need to glue our code in this upside down pyramid of delicate, artisanal code. It's how we all do it. It's how I learned to do it. But what this does, if you use tiny functions as your building blocks, except for the database call here, you could copy this into a REPL and make it work. By testing, I mean a lowercase t, not a fancy testing suite and craziness. The level of ease of testing this technique sold me. I never looked back. I was like, this is hard. There's a lot of stuff going on. No. What I do is I rely on the simple rules of functions, pass in one argument, return a value, throw an error that's a real error, not a fake error or a string. That's it. With that alone, you will avoid your error trap. You'll make it so your promises don't drop async values. It's as simple as it is. So I want to just finish with async await isn't replacing anything. It is fundamentally built on promises. It doesn't even have all the features of promises, concurrently waiting for a set of work. It's just something it will not do. So given that, let's try to stop pretending that async await is some relief from the promise hell we're living in. Let's try and just work our promises back into just following some simple rules. Suddenly it'll make things a lot less flaky. You won't lose your async values as they get lost in the callback void of space. And Yeah, and and let me just clarify, I'm definitely not saying don't learn async await. It's a useful pattern. They're all useful patterns. They all come with trade-offs. It's just the attitude and the approach that this replaces everything. Let me, this is something I meant to lead in with, but who saw this? This kind of lit up on Twitter and the Reddits and the social medias. This is actually what prompted me to come here. Mike was kind enough to say, so, have you seen this? How does it make you feel? Knowing full well he'd hit a raw nerve. And I appreciate it, thank you. No, so this is a cool feature. Let me just show you what it does. It fucks up your code. So is that too loaded? Watch it. It fucks someone up too. So, hey, yay, more lines. The problem with it is you basically lose the ability to centralize your error handling. Try catches don't compose well. You have to kind of organize them in like a top level place and hope that all the other code underneath it handled, always awaited, handled all that stuff, right? There's a bunch of rules for it as well. And now you've added a try catch block. Yay, we can feel like Java developers. Sorry, I ate something. No, so it's kind of like, it's a weird thing that they're like, it's weird that this kind of a thing just exploded when they're like, hey, more lines. Rarely are developers like, oh, cool. We added more lines. That's what I wanted. Notice if I ran this on a bunch of my own code and it adds a bunch of temporary variables and numbers them and does horrible things. And as impressive as this legitimately is, the reaction to it was just confusing. Like, why would you? Try catches don't help anyone. I think every time you use it, God kills a kid. It's true facts. So really, this is so let me finish on this. This is my article to go with this, and it includes the stuff we've talked about tonight. It's available at danlevy.net, and you can let me know how much you love this image because it took some time to find it. But really, I go into more detail and I do a live refactor of the code from that Google developer article. So I'm not afraid to punch up, but they are, these are common things. I want to break apart these misconceptions. Please look at it. If you've got any comments, questions, concerns, or you think I'm a giant idiot, please put that in the comments or tweet at me or whatever you do. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you. Well, thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for coming out.
Yeah, thanks for DenverScript. Beeps, Mike. You guys rock. Love you.
And speakers, Joe, congratulations to doing your first talk. Yeah. It is great to do your first talk. It is even, it's kind of crazy to do your first talk with live code.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it still works. Shit ton of pizza still, so anybody that wants to take some home, do it. There's also some more beer, so if you want to hang out, nerd out, feel free. Otherwise, thank you. And we'll also tweet out any and all of the slides.
But I'll show.
Yeah.
We'll share. Question of mine, what would you think of the alternative prompt?